Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And it's time for License to Review. This time Eric has License to Review For Your Eyes Only. I don't know anything about this movie. I did not watch this one this time. Eric's going to talk about it all by his lonesome. Tell me about it, sir.
Okay, so I think we're trying to
I know Bond looks too old. I know that much.
He does look too old. He looks younger on the cover. It's actually interesting because these covers usually don't have anything to do with the original posters, but the poster for this movie is so iconic. With it's Bond standing between this woman's legs.
Oh, so he just has him next to it.
Yeah, so they put the legs there because that's the thing that everyone knows. So this is kind of really important, kind of. So this is the first movie that John Glenn directs. John Glenn has been involved with the James Bond films for a while. He's been doing some second unit directing. I think he does some editing. He will direct all of the James Bond films in the 80s. So he directs
He's not astronaut.
No.
That's not John Glenn, the astronaut.
He directs this, he directs Octopussy, he directs View to a Kill, he directs License to Kill, and he directs Living Daylights.
Wow.
So, it was interesting because I love the Timothy Dalton films so much, where, like, the second I started watching this, and I've only watched this film once before, this Octopussy and View to a Kill are this weird nebulous zone for me, where, like, I almost forget that they exist, where, like, I have this thing in my mind, it's not fair, but I have this thing in my mind where I'm like, oh, these are the ones where they just kept making product. And I think a lot of people have that with the middle two Pierce Brosnan films, where, like, they forget Tomorrow Never Dies and Die Another Day happened. Like, they remember Goldeneye and The Bad One. And, like, in between that, there are two James Bond movies that no one remembers. And that's kind of what I have with everything after Moonraker, because, like, he had his really good one, his really bad one, and then he made 3 more James Bond movies. So John Glenn directs this, and he will direct the rest of the 80s, so, like, it almost immediately feels like the 80s, but I'm not sure if it really immediately feels like the 80s as much as it immediately feels like John Glenn, because I'm familiar with his directing style, and I associate that with Bond in the 80s. It's also written by Richard Maibaum and Michael G. Wilson. Richard Maibaum has on and off been a script writer of James Bond. He is a credited writer on almost every James Bond film up until I think he dies.
Wow.
There's a lot of lifers on James Bond.
From the beginning?
He is one of the credited writers on Dr. No, and is specifically attributed as introducing the comedy element to James Bond. Like, the one-liners, because this is
better or worse?
This is the thing I think we mentioned in Dr. No, or if I didn't, I'll mention it now, which is, he has those one-liners that are, like, real dark comedy, and, like, in the 60s apparently played really dark comedy. I think the first one is a car drives off a cliff, and James Bond says something where he's like, he was on his way to a funeral, like, something like that, and, like, apparently plays, like, really black comedy, and, like, that's him. Like, he does that. And so he's on and off been a writer. He writes almost all of, or he's a credited writer on almost all the films, because almost all the James Bond movies have multiple writers. Michael G. Wilson is the, I believe, stepson of Cubby Broccoli, who is the producer going all the way back, and his daughter is now the producer of the James Bond films with Michael G. Wilson. So Michael G. Wilson is, like, part of the family and is also a writer. So these two guys are the credited writers for the next Bond films throughout the 80s. I think there's 1 or 2 other writers attached to some of those, but, like, this is kind of the first of the, like, the 80s is like a team. It's the same director and the same 2 writers for the next 5 films. Which is interesting because they go all over the place. It's immediately a harder edge, darker, smaller Bond film, which is a thing I'll talk about when we get to Casino Royale, where I think Casino Royale tries to do that, but, like, things are so big, I think that movie's too big. This is a really small film. Before I get into any of that, I've talked about the opening. I've talked about the pre-credit scene, which is very famous, at least as far as James Bond goes. So, we talked about in A Spy Who Loves Me that originally the bad guy was supposed to be Blofeld, but there's all those rights issues. Next time I will be doing 2 movies. You'll be doing 1, which is, because that's the year that 2 James Bond movies came out. Yeah. 1 from Eon and 1 from the guy that owns the rights to Spectre and Thunderball. Because of all of that, this movie opens because they don't have the rights to Blofeld right now, or at least it's in dispute whether they have the rights to Blofeld and Spectre. This movie opens with Roger Moore at the grave of Tracy Bond, his dead wife, which is the third time that we'll make sure that anyone who thinks the James Bond codename thing is a good idea, like, everybody except for Pierce Brosnan mentions the fact that he has a dead wife. So it can't, like, people who aren't, like, Bond fans, but like casual fans, like, what if it's a different agent? It's just, like, what if they're each different agents that all get the code name 007, and they all drink the exact same drink, and they all have the exact same dead wife? It's dumb.
How long has she been dead? Or is it just ambiguous about it?
Well, here's what's interesting. There are dates on the gravestone.
Oh.
So it places her exactly at, I think 69 is when On Her Majesty's Secret Service comes out. So it says, like, died in 69. And we know that's modern day. So if we were playing with Bond aging, it would be more okay that Roger Moore...
I can remember her first name. I wasn't sure if that was the same character.
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's cool.
Yes. So... he's at her grave,
and then you should be calling back to the only one that gave Bond, like, a real character arc.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that is still technically the best of them in my mind until Skyfall for me.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like, I think that's the best Bond movie.
No, it's in my top 3. So then he leaves, gets in a helicopter, and then we find out that the helicopter is being piloted by an unnamed... you don't see his face. It's a bald man in a tan suit with a neck brace, but we never see his face. Oh, and he has a cat in his lap, and he's petting the white cat. Because the white cat is an invention of the films.
Wow.
But we never see his face, and he's like controlling the helicopter, and he's like trying to kill Bond. He's like, this is it, Mr. Bond. And James Bond's able to like jury-rig the like cords or whatever and take over the helicopter. Then he's piloting the helicopter, and Blofeld's also in a wheelchair. Sorry. The bald man is also in a wheelchair.
With the cat.
Yeah, the bald man with the cat and the tan Kim Jong-il suit is in a wheelchair. And he picks up the wheelchair with the leg of the helicopter and is flying him around. And the guy is like hitting on it. And he's like, Mr. Bond, we can talk about this. He offers to buy him a delicatessen, which is apparently a mob thing. They would buy you a delicatessen, but that's really been lost to the ages. So it's just this weird thing he says. And then James Bond takes him
that's hilarious.
To the top of like a chute, like what were those things called where like smog comes out? Like I want to say like a reactor chute, but it's not necessarily a nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
But like those like plumes that like where the smog's coming out, and he drops him in.
Like a chemical plant.
Yeah. So he takes him like a chemical plant, like the exact same thing that Spider-Man does with the clone. Like he takes him to the top of that, and then drops it, and then like tilts the helicopter forward so that the wheelchair falls off, and
this is the opening of the film.
This is the opening of the film.
That sounds amazing.
And the bald man with the cat in the wheelchair. Falls down the chute just going, Mr. Bond! And that's how they metatextually was like, yo, we don't need him. We don't need Spectre. We don't need Blofeld. Screw you. Wow. We can get along without him.
But they can't, right?
I mean, they do for the rest until Spectre.
I'm saying, is the movie any good?
Yes.
Then turn around and it's not a very good movie?
So, here's the thing that's interesting about this. I think this, if I were to sit down and rank all of the Bond films, this would rank higher than how I'm probably going to talk about this film, because it's closer to what I want a James Bond movie to be.
Okay.
But if all the James Bond movies were what I wanted them to be, this is probably middle of the road. Okay. So, like, if I rank all of the good James Bonds, this is probably near the bottom of the list. But it still gets in that ranking of the good James Bonds. It's really grounded. Like, really grounded. Like,
oh,
I don't know if there's a lot of explosions. Like, there's some gunfights, but, like, it's a real stripped-down Bond, which is what we always do. When we go too big, we always strip it down. So we did Moonraker, and now we're doing the really small movie.
Sure.
We did Die Another Day. Now we do Casino Royale. It is the perfection of what they've been trying to do with the Bond girls in the female lead Melina. So Melina is this woman whose parents are murdered by the bad guy, and she's just on this vengeance trail to go kill the bad guy. Who is the guy who's in this guy? This guy should be really better known. He's in Empire Strikes Back. He's the like main military guy that Darth Vader talks to. Like he's the guy in the AT-AT that's like talking to him. He's got that big silver helmet.
Yeah.
He's also the bad guy in Last Crusade, and he's the bad guy in this. He is a somewhat major character in Indiana Jones, James Bond, and Star Wars.
And nobody ever talks about
him. Nobody ever talks about him. I don't even know what his name is.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of a big thing.
You are proving this problem.
Yeah. I don't even know his name. So Melina is a woman that just is naturally kind of drop-dead gorgeous, but we don't put her in any skimpy outfits. We don't like sexualize her. We just let her be a character, and she's clearly very attractive.
Wow.
Which is kind of what we've been trying to do. We also don't necessarily know for sure that her and Bond sleep together. Like, her mind is on the mission of killing the man that killed her parents. And her and Bond have some back and forth, and like at the end they're together, and they go like skinny dipping, and there's this great little bit where we kind of justify the title, where she like disrobes and she says, "For your eyes only," and then they jump into the water. And I like, there's something really classy about that.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, so like we don't really sexualize this woman. We let her be naturally attractive, but we don't overly sexualize her. And like there's just something really classy about the way they deal with her. So I think like Tracy Bond and Vesper are, I think, the pinnacles for like Bond girls. But in this like string of like, especially after Man with the Golden Gun, starting with Spy Who Loved Me, and then Moonraker, which kind of tried to do it, but it was weird, and then into this, like we finally got it right. Where I'm like, no, you're treating a female character as an equal to Bond. You're not overcompensating for it, and you're not like playing down to her. You didn't cast like a bimbo and try to make her a character. Like she's a good actress. Like she's not like a great actress, but like she's as good as anybody else in a James Bond movie. And so she's a really strong female lead for James Bond. And I think it's kind of a bummer because I don't feel like she gets brought up that often. But like I think she's a really good Bond girl. Especially in that mold of like trying to make an equal to Bond and like a strong independent woman. Like she's very good at that. She's also Greek. And we talk about the myth of Elektra, which I thought was interesting and wondered if it was in any way an influence on Frank Miller.
Yeah.
Because it's right around that time.
Could have been.
Yeah. I don't know what the plot is. I watched this before my vacation. I watched this a couple of weeks ago. It's something about like an evil megalomaniac who's funding a figure skater who's... there's a weird thing when you go backwards. So one of the things is, Roger Moore looks really old. I don't know if Roger Moore's actually any older than Robert Downey Jr. is right now. But like... 70s 50 and like 2019 50 is a different thing.
You said that last time, yeah.
And so I think 70s youth and 2019 youth is a different thing, and that probably starts in the 90s. But so there's this young figure skating girl named BB, and she has like a chance at like a gold medal, and James Bond's kind of supposed to protect her, and she's kind of trying to sleep with James Bond. To me, she looks like she's like 14 or 15.
Interesting.
But we make movies with 25-year-olds as 16-year-olds.
Yep.
So, like, in my head, it's like really gross. Like, I can't even begin to think about something like that where I'm like, she's like a kid.
Yeah.
But I think that's more realistic. She's probably like 14 or 15. As opposed to what I've been programmed with my entire life, which is, women in their late 20s playing high schoolers. So it's more realistic, but it makes it weirder for me.
Sure.
Bond's not into her, which is nice, but she just won't stop. Like and most people that complain about this movie complain about her. She's not as annoying as people think she is, or people say she is, but she's not annoying either. It's good. It's not great. Like I said, like if I ranked all the good Bond films, it's towards the bottom of that list. but it is a good James Bond film. I also have to mention the Q scene where, we're getting more and more advanced technology, so he's going to do one of those things where, like, you describe a person and someone, a sketch artist sketches it. But because it's the 80s and we have advanced technology, nobody's sketching it, it's a computer program. And so they have this head that's just a generic, like, guy head, and James Bond's like, make the lips a little bit bigger, make his eyes, like, further apart, like do that. And I was like, there's no way they're going to get this to look like the guy. And then a woman comes in and brings them coffee, or tea. They're probably tea because they're British, and James Bond hates coffee. I don't know if that's in the movies, but that is a thing in the books. He hates coffee.
Oh, interesting.
And so we stop, and we, like, do the thing, and he's like, all right, now just do this, and then it's just the guy in a computer image. We just kind of, like, quick cut around it, like, now it's just the guy that he's looking for. It is another one that kind of plays with the Russian thing, which we did, obviously, in Spy Who Loves Me. We're finally doing the Russian thing. Because one of the weird things was when Pierce Brosnan took over, people were like, well, is there a place for Bond after the Cold War? And I was like, he doesn't fight Russia, like, most of the time. I don't know why that would be an issue for him now. This is another one that kind of plays with Russian politics a little bit. I think the ending's really strong. But also maybe a cheat. So it's building to the big climax where, like, Melina's going to try to kill this guy, and Bond's not going to let her do it. And it's that like once you cross once you cross that line, you can never uncross it. And the kill kind of gets robbed from her, but it works. I feel like that's a thing that always goes either way. Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We're like, you want the villain dead, but you don't want your character to be tarnished by killing them, so you kill them a different way.
Yeah.
And maybe...
Or like it's an accident, or...
It's not an accident someone else kills him. And I guess you could say that, like, her agency was taken away from her because this other guy kills him. And, like, maybe there's something to be said about, like, preserving her innocence, where, like, this guy that's already got blood in his hands kills the bad guy, so she doesn't have to. But it doesn't feel that way. If somebody read it that way, I wouldn't necessarily argue with them, but that's not how it feels like to me. It doesn't feel like we're robbing her of something. It does feel like it's a natural way to take that character. For Your Eyes Only, I feel like is an overlooked James Bond film, and I feel like it's overlooked because it's so small. Octopussy is a bit more flashy, and then View to a Kill is the second bad one. So I feel like this one kind of gets overlooked, but it's definitely worth watching. It's a real reserved Bond film, and I really appreciate that. Bond feels a little bit more human. Not too bad, but it does feel like there's a little bit of fight going on behind the scenes, and we know there is as these movies go along, especially in View to a Kill, where John Glenn wants them to be darker and grittier and more violent, and Roger Moore wants to be making borderline comedies. This is not a borderline comedy. Like, there's some silly stuff in it, but, like, it's very squarely, like, this is the darker and grittier Bond. Like, if there's a spectrum that starts at, like, Moonraker and Die Another Day and goes to, like, License to Kill and Casino Royale and Unlimited Secret Service, like, this one is more towards that side. But it does... Roger Moore almost feels like he doesn't want to be here.
I was going to ask you if he seems to get the material.
It kind of seems...
Like he gets it, but that's not what he wants to do?
Yeah, he seems a little dull here in comparison to some of his other roles. The seducing of women is getting weirder and will continue to get weirder as he gets older and the women stay the same age.
Yeah.
Moneypenny is still the same age, and that's kind of weird. Because she's since Dr. No, so she's also been aging. And so it's weird because I've always thought she kind of looked like a grandmother, but, like, now she's really starting to look like a grandmother.
Yeah. But
we're still kind of, like, you know, that sexual tete-a-tete that the Bond and her have. It's very strange. Yeah, he doesn't seem like he wants to be here. And I think it's after Spy Who Loves Me, each movie he's kind of, like, threatening to leave, and they just give him more and more money. He keeps coming back because everybody loves Roger Moore. I wish he'd left. There was a potential for this to be a new James Bond, and it kind of feels like that. This feels like a pretty good first James Bond movie for a new actor, and it should have been.
Guy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's rough.
So that's unfortunate. And it's sometimes when he's running around, it's just you can kind of see him huffing and puffing, and like he's just not.
And that's at least two now where you've got a more sophisticated script with the wrong Bond.
And so like he's got two more.
Wow.
Yeah, he really should have quit, and I think he says that by the time he gets to the last one, because the reason he quits is he meets the Bond girls, who I think is Tanya Roberts, who is she's in Beastmaster. She's also one of the moms on that '70s show. But he meets her mom and discovers that he's older than her mom. And he's like, oh, I should stop being James Bond. But I feel like people talk about View to a Kill like that's the one where he's old. It starts here. He's pretty old. They should have switched out at this point. And I think he would have had a pretty well-remembered run. Ending with Moonraker would have been a bummer, but he should have stopped. This would have been a better first movie for a new Bond than just another movie in Roger Moore's. But it's good. People should watch it, especially if you haven't seen it. It's one of the better Roger Moores, even if he's not great in it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
So what's the next one?
All right, so next one is 2. So I'm watching Octopussy. You do not have to watch that one.
Okay.
And then you and I will be watching Never Say Never Again.
Okay.
Which is the one where Sean Connery comes back and is the unofficial James Bond movie, but is a remake of Thunderball.
So you wanted me to watch it just because it's a remake of Thunderball?
Yes.
Or okay.
And it's the only one that, well, I guess the original Casino Royale, but I'm not going to watch that ever again.
But it's the weird one that doesn't count.
Yeah, it's the one that doesn't count. And Kim Basinger is the
oh yeah, I wanted to see it for
is the Bond girl.
Because you said it was like 88,
it's earlier than
87?
that.
Or is it even earlier than
It might
that?
be 84.
Oh wow.
But so it's Kim Basinger, and Blofeld is played by that guy that's in everything. He's the bad guy in Flash Gordon, and he's the voice of Vigo, and
I know his name right off. I know what you're talking about though.
It's Max something. But he's great and everything, and he's Blofeld. He's a little wasted, I feel. Oh, and it's also directed by Irvin Kershner.
Oh, you told me
Like
that too.
40 years after Empire Strikes Back. And
Yeah, no, I
you
gotta
can't
watch
tell
that.
it's the same guy.
That's
so
interesting.
so that one's just historically important. So
Yeah.
you should watch that one.
Okay.
But you don't have to watch Octopussy.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks for watching, folks. Sure appreciate it. And Eric, great job running down that movie. We are now getting really close to the end of the omnibus. We're going to go to our penultimate segment now and talk about a couple of books. I've got a book and Eric has a book, and we're going to do Read or We're All Going to Die. So come check that out if you are so inclined. And otherwise, thanks a lot for watching this video. We will see you again next time. I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
Later, folks.